Oxfam has warned the planting of trees to offset carbon emissions could have dangerous consequences. Countries are racing to achieve the Paris Climate Agreement's goal of net zero emissions by 2050. And the charity says so-called carbon sinks would require at least 16 million square kilometres of new forests. That's an area 5 times the size of India. And Oxfam says food prices could soar as more land is reforested. Tayyibe Aydin has more.
Fires in the US, Turkey, Italy and Greece. Floods in Germany, Bangladesh, India, and typhoons in Japan and China. These are some of the natural disasters that have occurred in the past few weeks alone, devastating livelihoods, farmland and infrastructure.
I lost everything. My car has burned. I couldn't save anything. The fire broke up very quickly. We had to flee, and this is what we came back to.
The World Economic Forum reported earlier this year that the climate crisis remains the biggest long-term threat to global stability. It estimates that a failure to properly tackle climate change could cost the world $1.7 trillion a year by 2050, and that investment in emissions reduction now will pay off handsomely down the track.
You can be pretty assured that what we've been seeing around the world this year, this will continue. The impact will be enormous. Change will be hard. It will be really hard, but it's so necessary.
The most important target, aimed at keeping global heating to below 2 degrees Celsius, is for greenhouse gas emissions to fall to net zero by 2050. 60 countries and a fifth of the world's 2,000 largest publicly listed corporations have created their own net zero goals. But in its latest report, Oxfam says most are avoiding making deep cuts to their emissions by relying on what it calls unreliable and unrealistic carbon removal schemes, or carbon sinks.
We welcome net zero commitments. They're a good springboard for further action, but the worry is that they become a dangerous distraction away from the really hard work of reducing carbon emissions now.
It says the plans to reforest vast tracts of land to absorb carbon from the atmosphere will have disastrous consequences for less developed economies, taking up agricultural land and creating food shortages for the world's growing population. But for corporations and wealthy nations, carbon sinks are an attractive solution. In the short term, it's cheaper to plant trees in a less developed nation than it is to make their own processes more sustainable.
And the worry is that if used at scale, these schemes to plant billions of monocultural tree plantations could actually risk pushing rural and indigenous communities off of their land, and it could drive food prices up dramatically.
With the effects of the climate crisis already forcing people from their homes and land, creating humanitarian crises and mass migration, the need for the major players to see beyond the immediate future and beyond the bottom line is becoming ever more urgent. Tayyibe Aydin, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with Okobo Ocharan, who joins us from Barcelona. He's the global lead at the Oxfam Climate Initiative. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for your time. Firstly, the planting of trees up until now has generally been seen as a positive way to mitigate a business's climate emissions, for example, and we normally associate that with smaller scale projects. But you're saying that if we were to roll it out on a massive scale, this could actually have dire consequences for food security. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, hi, hello to everybody. Thanks for having me in the program. So that's a very important message. Oxfam, we are saying that planting of trees is definitely a good scheme to remove the carbon that we have in the atmosphere. But what is happening actually, it's that right now in the last year or in the last 2 years, this has become in the wild west of countries and companies promising that they will have net zero emissions by 2050, by 2060, etc. The problem of that is that they are not talking as much as they should on reducing their emission, but they are talking about removing. Okay, and we are saying, okay, fantastic. If you are going to remove everything that you are saying, how you are going to be doing it? Because what happens is that the biggest removing scheme that we have, carbon removing scheme that we have, is from the land, from basically for forest. So basically, there is not a possibility of having that amount of land for removing all of that carbon. So what we need to be doing most importantly is to decrease or to definitely stop emitting as much carbon, and then just leaving the removing for the leftover, for the final amount of carbon that cannot be removed from the atmosphere.
So in February, the UN's food envoy warned that people living in poverty would actually face even worse food shortages during this coronavirus crisis. I'm wondering how much of that food insecurity can be attributed to the lack of farmable land to grow crops and other things.
Yeah, exactly. It's just food insecurity, and it is, for instance, the global prices of food. We have a raise of 80% of the food prices in 2020, and obviously it has a lot to do with several factors of the climate crisis, but also with the possible solutions we are looking for. Okay, so if we are basing our solutions on using crop land, okay, to remove carbon, as we are saying, we are in big trouble, because of course, obviously the land is a very valuable and a finite resource. Okay, and actually we don't have enough land, or we are, I mean, we may not have enough land if we keep with the climate crisis. So of course, if in the solutions to be doing looking for this, we are thinking that we are going to be using more land to remove carbon instead of producing food. This is driving us in, even as you are saying, even in a worse situation.
As you mentioned, the obvious way to reduce carbon emissions is to stop emitting them. But if we put aside, let's put aside the solution of reforestation. Are you aware of anything else that might be effective in terms of offsetting emissions? Is there anything out there that could achieve the same result, I guess, with fewer consequences?
Not to the date. There is not any proof technology that can work in, we will say, massively as for instance, we have the removal that forests do. Okay, so it's true that when governments are making their commitments to be net zero in 2050, they are putting that to the possible solutions that we might be inventing in the way to be there. There is not any one that we know that can be doing massively. And this is precisely why we are pointing out this problem now. Okay, so we are saying to governments, fantastic that you are trying to achieve net zero. Tell us how. Tell us how. Tell us what are your targets. Tell us how we are going to be arrived there, to governments and companies, because it's fantastic that we just make publicly we are going to be net zero by 2050. But tell us, first of all, how you're going to be stop emitting, and in which pace in the coming years, and then what is going to be left to be removed and how you are going to be removing. And that's the most important idea that we need to be sharing here, because if not, it sounds like a fantastic information they are sending, but there is not doing any favor to fight against the climate crisis.
Okay, Jacobo Ochoran from the Oxfam Climate Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. We appreciate it.
Super. Thank you very much to you.